Mr. Speaker, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Think on these things. Psalm 67, 1 to 7. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face shine upon us. Selah. That your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among the nations. May the peoples praise you, O God. May all the peoples praise you. May the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you rule the peoples justly and guide the nations of the earth. Selah. May the peoples praise you, O God. Then the land will yield its harvest, and God, our God, will bless us. God will bless us, and all the ends of the earth will fear him. Shall we pray? Lord God of righteousness and truth, grant to our members of Parliament and all in position of responsibility the guidance of your Spirit. May they keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all mankind. So may your kingdom come and your name be hallowed. Now, Father, we thank you for bringing Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis and the elected members of Parliament of the Free National Movement safely through 1 year of governance. And as they begin year 2, may our nation prosper in every segment of our society beyond our expectations. Grant to our Majesty's loyal opposition, led by Honorable Philip Brave Davis, the wisdom to oppose respectfully when necessary, so that our government may decide on the best strategies to employ to cause our nation to prosper in every segment of our society. May the Holy Spirit lead and guide your proceedings today to the honor and glory of God. In Jesus' name, amen. Praying now the prayer Jesus taught his disciples to pray, saying, Our Father, hallowed be thy name, kingdom come, your will be done on earth. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. We forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. When the business of the House suspended, we were at second readings. We were at second reading and committal of bills. For the second reading and committal of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Yarmouth.
Mr. Speaker, let me first begin my presentation on the debate on the bill for the bill to debate on this debate on the Access to Affordable Homes Bill 2018. Before I commence, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Almighty God. I'd like to thank the Almighty God for giving me this opportunity to be here today to make this presentation. After, yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Almighty God, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to do what is being reinforced in my mind by one of our nation's chief sons, and that is the former Governor General, Sir Arthur Folkes, when he spoke to young persons and he spoke to the necessity of young people entering into public life. I was always taught that we have our God and we owe him not only a debt of gratitude, but we are to serve him in spirit and in truth, and he provides us with a country from which we are able to protect our family and serve him. And listening to Sir Arthur, first I'd like to congratulate him on his attainment of his 90th birthday, and also pray God's richest blessings on him. But he advised the young persons to become involved in the public and political life of our country. And that admonition is necessary on all socio-political and economic levels if we are to build the Bahamas that we want. And if we don't volunteer ourselves as committed Bahamians, we cannot complain when somebody else comes to this country and see opportunity where we see adversity. And so I would like to commend him, and I would like to advise not just the young, the old also, that the time is right now to give the best you can to your country. And there was one great United States president who said that ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And so I commend him for that message, and I thank him. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize the great constituency of Yamacraw, who saw it fit to send me here to represent their interests. And what I've just said earlier, and thanking Sir Arthur Folkes, I've said to them. And I quite recall we had a town meeting where I invited all and sundry, and I invited them to take advantage of the opportunities that our country has to offer. You have to take the land. You must strive to be involved in the economic life of your community. We have to be involved in the intellectual life of our community, because God and country calls us to do just that. So we had a frank conversation. We look at information technology and the way that the world is going, and we agreed that we would prepare ourselves, prepare our children by way of education to do just that, in terms of ensuring that all children have basic skills as the ability to read and write in order to take advantage of these opportunities. Mr. Speaker, we're here today to debate something that is near and dear to me, and that's affordable homes, but it goes further than that. It goes to land and the acquisition of land in the Bahamas by Bahamians. And I had a conversation with my illustrious senior, and I've always spoken about him, and I told him he's now in England, and I said, I'm going to be calling your name today. And that is the person of Arthur Dion Hanna Jr. And I could remember his lamentations and his travails. And he always had the saying, free the land for Bahamians, and that they should have access to it, because you know, when one looks at our history and we go back, there was a time when certain interests decided that the world should be divided into two. One country got one half, and the next country got the next. And then we were brought through by way of that great transatlantic voyage to this country. And that experience, and I'll have an opportunity to, I'll speak about it now, because before I go on, I would like to recognize the 50th anniversary of the death of Martin Luther King. And I had the good privilege to purchase a copy of a supplement that really looked at his life. And he impressed, and his life, as he's no longer here, impressed the virtues of love, faith, and hope. And he stressed that through love, faith, and hope, we could accomplish anything. And coming off the backs of that transatlantic experience and what they were experiencing in America, and even though we try and deny it, we experience it here in the Bahamas, he said to us that we have to continue the fight for education, for land ownership, and to be a part. That's what he was suggesting. He was saying it to the world because he was a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. And he said that we have to continue the fight as humanity. And his message was larger than just color, as humanity, for the total liberation of a people, and that's the human race, and to recognize the inalienable dignity of the human person. And you know, when I thought about Mr. Martin Luther King, I thought about the whole circumstance when your mace, Mr. Speaker, was hurled from the halls of Parliament, and what it really meant, because it demonstrated from the transatlantic period that we should never forget. More persons died during that phase than the Holocaust. It demonstrated a passing of the baton, and it demonstrated, even in the throwing of your mace and the persons surrounding it, we saw where our leader of the Free National Movement, the first recognized leader, Sir Cecil Wallace, Whitfield, was integrally involved in that process. We saw where there was separation, we saw where there was hurt, we saw there was pain. And the reason why I came to the point where the mace was thrown is because around that time we spoke about land. We had a bill, the Registration of Land Act, that was supposed to be implemented in the Bahamas. And we cannot forget that there was a time in this country when you voted by how much land you had. Land was used to enslave. Land was used to disempower. Land was used to denigrate. And there was a promise that we would look at land, the regularization of land, and how people, Bahamians, would recognize their natural right to be entitled to such. But unfortunately, that piece of legislation was produced by the UBP. And we campaigned on it. Those then campaigned on it. My father always told me about it. But no government, until the Ingram administration in 2010, saw it fit to bring legislation to this Parliament to regularize and empower land. And the reason why I told Mr. Hanna this morning when I spoke to him as he was in England that I would call his name, because I quite recall when the law school, the Eugene Fuchs Law School, started to look at this. And we got secret messages that if you're going to look at titles to land, you could not go back beyond a certain time frame. And when I first spoke in this honorable place and I recognized the member for Angliston, I spoke of her father and the case from Cat Island. And I'm going to come to the bill, but this is necessary so that people will understand the significance of what the Free National Movement is doing. Not only the significance of what the Free National Movement has done, but what our forefathers intended for us in this diaspora. And so when I first spoke, I spoke about Angliston's father.
The real intention.
And I do recall, and at that stage I even invited Angliston to sit on some of the panels as we traveled the Bahamas to look at this whole issue of land. It's very important. And so I remember we got little secret messages not to go any further back, but I want to speak to that Cat Island case when the former Attorney General, Sir Arthur Dion Hanna Sr., involved himself in a case from Cat Island to defend some old ladies who had gone on a piece of property. And he did his best. And I quite recall Mr. Hanna telling me how, thank you very much, Cat Island. Thank you very much. No, just, I'm going to give my speech. And Mr. Speaker, this morning, Mr. Speaker, this morning, protocol directs that I speak to you. And anybody else who wants to speak in this parliament speaks to you through me. You know, for more than 40 years, and my family member, Cat Island Rumkins in Salvador, my auntie always reminds me of that. I grew up with her. Says, get it right. But it had more than 40 years
To get this right.
to get this right.
That is right.
And the reason why I'm taking my time is because this is revolutionary. I know that there are those who don't want to discuss land. And everybody here understands that. But for the gentleman who everybody before the election cussed and say he couldn't speak, he can't think, he can't walk, he can't talk, he has done something that very few in this country had the nerve to do. That's correct. He's done something. And not only that, he's also invited the community to be a part of this discussion. And that's the recognition of the right of Bahamians to participate in this process. But you know, I hear Cat Island, through you, Mr. Speaker, there's informal communication. And one of the things I want to, old and young listening from home, is that they starved you out when you tried to do certain things, you know. See, and Cat Angliston will confirm it, that her father caught hell for doing that case. You lose business. How dare you talk about going for certain persons to assist them to question something that has been used for years to disempower? The Privy Council have spoken about it. Our own Court of Appeal, Justice Crane Scott said the other day in a judgment, she said the court may be an unwitting participant in a fraud when looking at how land is adjudicated. The white paper that was laid the other day, not the other day, on the 11th of April 2018, Mr. Speaker, which looked at the reformation of land in the Bahamas. It took cognizance of the registry, because the Privy Council highlighted it, the way that we keep our information, and we're focusing now on ICTs, information technology, and how do you put all these things in a registry so that nobody could send land 3, 4, and 5 times as occurred in Bozine Town. And nobody can do what is being done to persons that was done in Nassau Village or Sir Lyndon Pinlin Estates. These are real-life situations, Mr. Speaker, to afford Bahamians the opportunity to participate by owning a piece of the rock. And as I said when I first began, Mr. Speaker, that they separated the world in half. They put down their flag. And in 1973, we got independence. We were able to hoist our flag. And by way of hoisting our flag, Mr. Speaker, it demonstrated that we are a sovereign nation. And we should have the ability to determine things the way we think best in the best interest of the Bahamian people. The white paper identified Bozine Town. It also identified public consultation in this process. And one of the things, and the intended engagement of former Court of Appeal President Dame Anita Allen to fill the position of Law Reform Revision Commissioner, and the role she will play in engaging members of the public to discuss this. And what it will do is it will allow us to go back in time and come to the present and see the significance of why we should liberate not just land, people, but in going further than people, to deliberate and rewrite history in a sense by doing what Bob Marley said, emancipating our minds from the mental slavery that is being perpetrated against us for the many years. And so here we are, Mr. Speaker. In the speech from the throne, Her Excellency, the Governor General, Dame Marguerite Pinlan, in her own eloquent and articulate way, read from the throne and looked at our government's intention to provide affordable home and housing for Bahamians. She also, I crave your indulgence. Okay. Affordable homes. She spoke to the provision by this government of affordable homes. I will deal with rent to own. But she also spoke to the over-the-hill regentrification process. And Mr. Speaker, I want to just say one thing about that. We've talked about over-the-hill for years. I remember persons like Mr. Edmund Moxie. And I know St. Barnabas has got it right. And I told St. Barnabas that I'm going to personally donate something. I don't want no short bus. This, what we got across there of Samilo, has to be changed. He was a big man. He deserved to be with 10 foot tall. You know, I remember as a boy coming from Carolina and going over Paradise Island and seeing our brothers and sisters from Europe. Man, you all know them in the garden, the cloisters, big tall things. I saw the thing that they have of Cylinder.
What is that?
Oh, very good.
All right.
Very good.
Okay.
But I think what we want for Mr. Moxie, something that's 10 foot tall. Because when you look at his philosophy, and I'm just highlighting him, I'm not excluding anybody else. And what he thought about over the hill when he spoke about Jumbe Village. Because everything was Bay Street centric. Economic, land, you name it. And there's a reason why I said they shared the world in half. That thought and that philosophy continued. Every business of consequences was given to a certain group in this country, inclusive of land. And so when Mr. Moxie came over the hill, and this is just about the Over the Hill project, he said we should have museums, libraries, and not only did he do it, he started the process. Unfortunately, everything was bulldozed. But Lady Pinlan spoke about the government's thrust for land, and that is the reason why I highlighted the white paper and what we intend to do. And one of the major things that we intend to do to empower persons is to recognize this whole concept of generation property, which is really a farce. I'm going to go to Cat Island, where persons claim to own hundreds of acres, but they have no titles to the property. And for more than 40 years, we've done very little, if anything, to do anything about it. But the man who they say can't speak, can't talk, and can't hardly walk is doing a revolutionary thing. And he doesn't care about the whispers or about the silent message. It's about getting history right and moving forward in a way that is just for the Bahamian people. And so to recognize what Mr. Hanna always called the fast, and to give people titles to land, and to recognize and fulfill what the Privy Council and our Court of Appeal and our Supreme Courts have been saying for years. We must get it right. What our international partners have said, I quite recall when I was bar president, you'd always get calls from embassies saying, when are we going to do this thing about land? How are we going to lobby? How are you going to lobby for it? And so now we're doing it. And so the access to affordable home, Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to provide Bahamians with an opportunity to have access to lands provided by the government of the Bahamas. There was a reason why I spoke to Nassau Village and Bozine Town. And there was a Supreme Court decision by Justice Lyons which looked at the obligation of government to regulate. And when you regulate, you should ensure persons put in the proper infrastructure. So they don't have to worry about septic tanks or sewage or lighting. And so what it seeks to address is to provide certain areas in New Providence, not just in New Providence, but throughout the, oh, but throughout the Bahamas and I'm watching the time, in the Family Islands, where persons would be able to purchase from the government. Where persons would be able to purchase from the government portions of land, and it's for $30,000 maximum, because obviously you may be able to go into the Family Islands where you may be able to do it for less, for $30,000, and the bill would allow the Minister of Finance, authorizes the Minister of Finance to make certain exemptions. Mr. Speaker, other speakers will come behind to say, and I will tell you, it's no surprise that land, especially in New Providence, is extremely high. The average portion of land or tract of land in New Providence is about $75,000. 100? 100, and depending on where you go, it's more. And what I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, is that we've already started getting not just inquiries, but persons saying, especially in certain areas, saying that they would like to have some access to the land. Now, Mr. Speaker, access to affordable housing is nothing new. This is something as economies change, as countries grow, that countries around the world are having to deal with. And the World Resource Institute looked at the crisis of affordable housing around the world. And all of us could remember when there was an extreme fire in the UK the other day, where persons, thank you. Where there was an extreme fire in the UK the other day, where persons lost their lives. Let's get this right. Huh? All right, thanks. Where persons actually lost their lives because of the nature of the homes that they were living in. In Florida, in the US, what the government in the US had to do was carve out certain portions of land so that persons, especially nurses, doctors, and whatever have you, especially in high-end areas, could be there to provide certain essential services. And so what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, in the Bahamas is doing just that, recognizing that there is a need to provide affordable homes for Bahamians. And I can tell you that we are going to have the drafters look at legislation to recognize the promise that was provided for in the speech from the throne for rent to own. That's going to be done. But at this stage, we've started, I think, in a yeoman way by placing a white paper before the House of Assembly and inviting members of the public to look at total land reform. And this is just a part of the agenda to do that. And so, Mr. Speaker, the bill, I will take you through the bill. The bill has an interpretation section, and there's also an amendment that we will deal with that looks at, defines dwelling home. It looks at, section 3 looks at the objective of the bill, which is to make affordable homes more accessible by exemptions on building materials for the building of dwelling homes, to designate service lots owned by the government for exceptions on building materials to be used for a single family home. So we're going to designate lots. And then for your building materials, you can get an exemption on that. As I said, under the Subdivision and Planning Act, Mr. Speaker, the government will ensure that all of the necessary infrastructure is provided. Mr. Speaker, Section 5 provides for the application for an exemption. Once you make an application, you make it to the minister, and the minister would then have the authority to consider your application. And obviously, Mr. Speaker, there will be regulations attached to this act, because one of the concerns, not just in the Bahamas, but internationally, is you don't want hoarding. You don't want someone to come and purchase 10 tracts of land and then resell them. And you don't want persons to be in the business of flipping. So we're going to look at that in a sense, Mr. Speaker. And Section 6 looks at the consideration for the approval of the application, what the minister would have to do in order to approve the application. This is where the minister is satisfied that an applicant relates to a designated subdivision. The minister shall grant the approval of the application subject to the provisions of this act and to any such conditions as the minister sees fit. One of the things, I know that there might be those who might say, what if the minister decides that he wants to do X, Y, or Z? There will be regulations with this act, Mr. Speaker. And there's always the opportunity to review the decision of the minister. One of the things I crave your indulgence to segue into is the ombudsman legislation that is being laid before this House. And you know, I constantly hear persons say that the government has not done anything. But
Why do you take that
people,
serious?
people died for land.
Why do you take that serious?
When you look at the irregularities and the maladministration that occurs in government, all 21st century governments have an ombudsman that looks at the functions of administrative arms of government to see whether or not they're being done properly. I quite recall some time back that there was serious talks about codes of conduct for members of parliament. Within less than a year, the Integrity Commission bill was laid in this House. It was sent to all of our partners. The bar, org, had a copy to go over it. And it spoke to codes of conduct. And we took one of the most, I've even heard parliamentarians say, listen, this may be going too far. It is being laid, persons campaigned on it. And in less than a year, you have a piece of legislation that's going to come into force that would regulate the way that we conduct ourselves, not just here in this House, you know, but as a public servant, as a servant of this country, you have an obligation to conduct yourself in a certain way, even in your private dealings. And I've heard persons say it goes too far, but you have to build a certain infrastructure. So there's the ombudsman legislation. And I thank you for allowing me to segue, Mr. Speaker. And then there's the Proceedings of Crime Act. Only in 2017 you had the UK passing legislation that looks at unexplained wealth, because around the world leaders were getting away with taking lots of monies. There's no secret to that. And if you want to bring transparency and clarity in the way that we do things, if you want to bring transparency and clarity in the way that we deal with land, you need that. I quite recall someone was doing an estate for someone who worked in government, and they were shocked as to how this person was able to acquire so much land, far beyond what they would have ever made from their salaries. Far beyond that. You have to lay a proper infrastructure. And I know the Prime Minister will not fault me for this. As we do things, even our members have to read the bills and the significance of what we've done. And what we intend to do. You can't have a thief watching the money. You have to put structures into place that you check everybody. There are checks and balance for everybody. So when you look at this Proceedings of Crime Act and what it says for public figures, when you look at the Integrity Commission bill and what it says for public figures, ask the persons in the NGOs in the community, they're happy with it. Freedom of information, we've activated it. We've had training for the public sector, for persons in the private and the media. So that information is necessary for persons. Yes, that's what it is. So if you want to know who got this or got that, nobody could hold back on it. Even some persons in the public sector say, man, is going too far. You mean they could be able to get that too? Yes, that too. I would admonish and I don't think the Prime Minister would fault me for this, even our members, to please be abreast or become apprise yourselves of what we've been doing and the foundation that the minister-led government has laid. So the bill, as I said, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you very much for allowing my digression, it allows certain exemptions for lots. The minister can approve the application in Section 7. There can be an extension. If the application is granted, it is for 2 years. You get the lot, you have it for 2 years, and in certain circumstances, the minister has the authority in extraordinary circumstances to extend the 2-year period for building, and that's inclusive of bringing in items. I quite recall I had the unfortunate experience, and I want to say to Bahamians that we ought to prepare and take all of the precautions that are going to be given out by the government for the hurricane season that is soon to come. Because when I don't even want to call the name of that hurricane because I thought my roof was gone, but it left my roof leaking. And I thank God that I had some insurance. Some of my friends didn't. And so we were able to acquire the exemption to bring in the roofing material to repair my house. And the reason why I say that is because the process has already been done. And for those in the family islands who know, you can go even with this act. Once the minister gives you the exemption, you can go and you can get the exemptions on duties to buy the roofing material, whether here or in the U.S., to have your homes built. There are restrictions. Section 8 provides for restrictions on the disposition of materials imported duty-free. It says no materials imported into the Bahamas with the benefit of any exemption for custom duty under Section 7 shall be used for the purpose other than constructing the dwelling home on the service lot, or be sold, given away, or otherwise disposed of, because it's for a specific purpose. We don't want persons to start a business out of this. And I said, I made it clear when I first started about the revolutionary effect of what we're doing with Barbados legislation that's going to really deal with some serious stuff in this country. We're looking now on providing tracts of land, and I know that they will be oversubscribed. We're going to look. We have appointed a law commission who will look at the bills that have been laid and who will also look at the whole question of rent to own. We already have persons renting government properties. We have to do some repairs to those. So you have rent. It's just you have to find a way to structure it where we can do the rent to own. And so that is being considered, but there is a lot that has been done over the year. And so there are offenses that are attached to it. Any persons who contravenes the provisions of the Act, I would advise them to look at that because we're going to monitor it strictly. There are also penalties, and one of the things I want to highlight is the regulations. And regulations clarify a lot of the ambiguity that may be in the Act as to how things will be done in the Act. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the government. I want to commend the government for doing something that was first introduced by the United Bahamian Party, and it was implemented in the Turks and Caicos. And it is contemporary. As a matter of fact, persons can't believe that we don't have a proper land registry. I want to highlight the Prime Minister just introduced his delivery team on yesterday, and somebody who's closely associated with it and who's had the experience of working in the Lands and Survey Department was overjoyed, elated. Says we have to look at the legislation, it's too old. We have to bring some regularity to the way that we treat land in the Bahamas, who gets, who don't get. We have to ensure that the persons that benefit from this policy are the right persons that should benefit, that is Bahamians. And so in the general scheme of things, very short. And I think I jumped a little too fast because one of the first town meetings we had, the Prime Minister said we had to engage persons, and I heard that we were going to lay the legislation. We went in Yamacraw. We invited Mr. Elliott Lockhart, and Mr. Lockhart had already done his opinion on it. So if you all want a sidebar or discussion on land reform in the Bahamas, Mr. Elliott Lockhart is eager. And if you want him to come and sit on your panel, I'm quite certain that just with some adjustments, he may be able to do that or suggest someone. The Surveyor General came and sat. We had a young man, Mr. Petroselli. Pardon me? Elliott Lockhart, QC. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we had Mr. Petroselli Edwards, a brilliant lawyer from the Attorney General office. He sat on it. And what, and, excuse me. And believe it or not, and I was excited, the Bahamas Real Estate Association showed up in big time. You had the present president and the past president kept coming out to say, it is time. It is time for us to regularize land. So this is just a subset of what the administration is doing. And anybody, and I will debate anybody within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, because I think that my illustrious senior, Mr. Arthur Dion Hunter Jr., has prepared me very well for this battle. He's prepared me very well for the implementation or the regularization of land in the Bahamas. And so, looking at this subset, introducing the bills, now the access to affordable homes, and then we're going to go and look at rent to own, because we already have persons renting government properties. We have to do something where they can rent to own it. And so we are doing that. We've appointed the land commissioner. Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, on the authorization of the Prime Minister, that we are a consultative government. But we are about the business of the Bahamas. And so this process is also about consultation. So we invite the opposition as we go through this debate. Any meaningful suggestion that they will have, we're prepared to accept it. Mr. Speaker, before I sit, there's a very important day that's coming. And you know, even he, and Longfellow has a quote, and I've used it here before, even he in his greatest agony, before he left earth, and I'm paraphrasing, to go back to the Master. And as we said, the Our Father prayers, he forgave, asked God to forgive those who had mistreated him. Before he left earth to go, he saw about his mother. He told one of his disciples, that's your mother. And he said, your mother, that's your son. Yeah. And I would like to recognize a lady that's near and dear to me. Miss Sadie Dorset Scott from the island of Cat Island, my dear mother. Let me look at the camera. To tell you, mother, I love you. And I pray God's blessings upon you. And I would also like to recognize my dear wife, Miss Kathy Ann Cassandra Johnson. And I thank you for the gift that you have given to me by way of a child, that God has been able to bless me through you in more than one way. I'd also like to recognize the mothers in the constituency, the great constituency of Yamacraw. We will be coming around. We'll be giving you your flowers before you depart. And all of the mothers throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But there's a special group of mothers, Mr. Speaker, who find themselves in Dowds, Cat Island. I grew up with my grandmother in Dowds, and she is now gone, Miss Drusilla Dorset, and also my Aunt Vernice, my mother who I grew with. And I thank you for your prayers and your continued support. And my Aunt Gracie, my Aunt Nika, my Aunt Jenny, my Aunt Lorraine, and all of my sisters who are mothers. I pray God continue to bless that angel, those geniuses who only work works of love. And that is the mothers, not just of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but the world. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a second? Chair recognizes the honorable member for Garden Hills.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the great and wonderful people of the Garden Hills constituency. And as I always say, Mr. Speaker, I'm here because of them. And I'm here to represent and support their views and to ensure that the constituency is involved and benefit from government's policy. And I want to again thank them, Mr. Speaker, for giving me that opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to just follow up on what my colleague said about a great man, Arthur Hanna. And I want to congratulate him, sir, on his 90th birthday. Out of folks. Let me start with Mr. Hanna first. Mr. Hanna, let me get it right first. I want to congratulate Mr. Hanna. No, Mr. Hanna. I want to congratulate Mr. Hanna, who turned 90 a few weeks ago, and also Mr. Folks. But I want to focus more, Mr. Speaker, on Mr. Hanna, whose vision more than 35 years ago, sir, was to do what we are doing today.
You can finish that point. You can finish that.
And if you really look at Mr. Hanna's legacy, Mr. Speaker, you would come with the view that he was at F&M. Because, Mr. Speaker, 35 years ago, just think of this in context, Mr. Speaker. 35 years ago, this man came to his own party and said, I want to start a program. All I want is $2 million. $2 million to do urban renewal in Camp Road and to change the lives and direction of the persons he represented in Camp Road. 35 years ago. $2 million was a lot. Regrettably, Mr. Speaker, his party rejected his idea and did not allow him to foster his vision of wiping away the tear from the eyes of every single Bahamian. And so, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing today is almost identical to what he sought to do 35 years ago. And that's why I said, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the record of the Free National Movement in housing, you could easily come to the conclusion that what Mr. Hanna was saying then and what he firmly believed and what was executed by the Free National Movement and refused by his own party would compel you to come to the conclusion that he not only cared for the Bahamian people, but all of the good things that we did in the past and that we are doing today represents a good section of his vision. And that's why I am assured that the Member of Parliament for Angleton is going to support our initiative 100%. I offer that assurance, Mr. Speaker. I offer that assurance because she too believes that we should empower Bahamians, that we should provide Bahamians with affordable homes, and that we should focus and keep our attention on the women, the needy of in the Bahamas.
That's it. That's it.
And so, Mr. Speaker, we are demonstrating today that this is a government of the people, that we are continuing to work for the people, and an unmatched record in providing homes and service lots for the Bahamian people, again, is further demonstrating to them that it is indeed the people's time. Mr. Speaker, as I started 35 years ago about what Mr. Hanna did and what his vision was for the Bahamian people, I'm going to try and put in context what the Free National Movement has done over the last 10 years, to put that in context so that younger Bahamians and persons who are in this place for the first time would get some view of what the Free National Movement has done and is doing and will continue to do for the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, when I was first elected in 2007, I was given the responsibility to work in the Ministry of Housing. Our first week in housing, Mr. Speaker, we discovered we were given $2 million to repair homes. The Prime Minister at the time said, there's been so much cry about repairing homes. Let's start with that. Let's start by repairing the homes in our communities. So he gave us, at the time, what we thought was a mega budget of $2 million to repair homes. Midway through 2007, after realizing that we had over 600 homes to repair, we also discovered that the former government left a $25 million debt owed to small contractors, hardwares, and small business persons. So we had to address that issue, pay off the $25 million to small businessmen, hardwares, and local businesses. And then we realized, Mr. Speaker, that midway through the PLP's term, they had changed ministers of housing. First it was Neville Wisdom, who was the Minister of Housing, and then Shane Gibson. And we realized, Mr. Speaker, that the second Minister of Housing did not accept the housing assignment of the first minister. So in Pride Estates, for example, Mr. Speaker, where there were 90 homes built, there were owners, 2 persons were assigned the same house. Minister Gibson simply did not accept the assignment of Minister Wisdom, and so the houses assigned to individuals by Minister Wisdom, Mr. Gibson say, no, we're not giving you that house. And so we had to make a judgment and we had to, Mr. Speaker, almost be like Solomon. Because we had to say, okay, let's see who got the first letter of assignment. If you had the first letter, you stay in this house. And when the Free National Movement started their building process, we will make an accommodation and give you a house, assign you another house. We thought that was the fairest way to address that problem. But it's, Mr. Speaker, it's just a reflection of how the former government acted and what they did. So those are some of the things, Mr. Speaker, that we were faced with in 2007. By the time we were completed, Mr. Speaker, we had built over 800 houses in several subdivisions, completed upgrades and repairs to over 600 houses in Yellow Elder, Pride Estates, Industrial Gardens, Dignity Gardens, etc. Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. We repaired over 600 homes in a short period of 5 years. We built over 800 houses. More than that, Mr. Speaker, but I was just about to get to that, sir. We had to repair the houses because persons were placed in houses that were shoddily built. Shoddy construction, Mr. Speaker. People who did not have licenses to build. People who just did a bad work. And I'll get back to Spring City in a minute. Mr. Speaker, what was even more regrettable, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that even the contractors that they had put in these houses to build them, when we came to office, all of the contractors had abandoned the houses. They weren't building anymore because they were not paid. The last payment to contractors was in November. And so by May, all of the contractors who were assigned houses to build just left them. They were just abandoned in the various subdivisions. Our task, Mr. Speaker, was to improve the housing stock. We had to retool, Mr. Speaker. We had to re-engage. We had to pay off those contractors who did not get paid so that Industrial Gardens could be completed and parts of Dignity Gardens. And so, Mr. Speaker, having done all of the heavy lifting for the former government, making sure that contractors were paid, small business owners and operators were paid. I indicated earlier that the bill left behind by the previous government was $25 million. And that may be small money to somebody who's got money. But when we're talking about a little hardware in the Grove and Hannah's in Angliston, Standard Hardware in Marsh Harbor, we're talking about small business persons who were owed $25 million, and the PLP simply said, either we are not going to pay you, or we cannot pay you, or they didn't take the time to spend the money to ensure that their businesses could continue. So, Mr. Speaker, when we started the whole process of building, Mr. Speaker, our focus was very simple. We were going to firstly target those individuals who could afford it, who had the money, who could get the money, who could get the tick off by the government, but who simply did not have the down payment because they did not have $15,000 saved. And so our first act, Mr. Speaker, was to reduce the deposit required. And so we reduced the deposit to those persons who were interested in purchasing homes. That made immediately hundreds of Bahamians had the opportunity to buy a house. And if you were a public officer, Mr. Speaker, we know that you could get a government check off, so that was guaranteed. But by reducing the deposit and the down payment required, Mr. Speaker, we then helped hundreds of ordinary Bahamians. And that is the context, Mr. Speaker, of what we're doing today. We're trying to get hundreds of ordinary Bahamians to get home ownership. This is a wonderful step, an amazing step by this Free National Movement government to show that it cares for the Bahamian people. We're not going to tell you, Mr. Speaker, come up with $100,000. We're limiting the cost of a service lot to $30,000 and under. That's all. Now, think about this. An average Bahamian who goes to the mortgage corporation or a bank who is assessed by the bank could tell this Bahamian, look, you qualify for $80,000. That's what you qualify for. That's what we're prepared to lend you. Think of that ordinary Bahamian, Mr. Speaker, who can get $80,000, who could get a service lot for $20,000 in a moderate income area, and then could go to the Ministry of Finance and get duty exemption to build that house. So a house that would normally cost an ordinary Bahamian $130,000 is almost automatically reduced. The $80,000 person could now buy and qualify to build a house and to purchase a service lot for that number, because they could get all the materials at cost. So if they want to go to a hardware in the Grove, or Kelly's Hardware, or some, that's in the Grove too, yes. or that in Angleton, yes. If they want to go to one of these hardwares, and a local hardware, and say, listen, I qualify for $80,000 from the bank. I could get duty exemption from the Ministry of Finance for the materials. Give me the cost of materials I need to build this two-bedroom house for me. Think about that now. Think about that. So the cost of materials is now $20,000 because the customs duties have been removed from the building materials for that house. And so that party now can find a contractor.
Yes, yes.
Go to the same mortgage company, whether it's a bank or the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, and say, listen, I could get materials from this house based on this plan for $20,000. I'm going to pay $30,000 for the lot, or $24,000 for the lot. This is what I have left for a contractor. Let's work out a deal. And in one quick process, this person, through their financier, could come up with this money. Presently, there are 300 plus lots in Dignity Gardens that the government intends to make available to Bahamians immediately. Coming from housing where there were hundreds of applications and hundreds of persons could easily not only apply but could qualify. From my experience, I suggest, and I told this to the Minister of Housing, once this program is approved, you better find plenty more lots. There's the first 300 gone already in Dignity Gardens, the rest in Spring City and other places in Albuquerque and in Morristown, Exuma, they're automatically gone. Because persons can now reasonably get a house for $100,000. That is what this bill is going to do for ordinary Bahamians.
Wow, wow.
Think about that.
Oh, that's,
And I want the Bahamians out there to really think about what the Free National Movement, according to his manifesto, is doing with them. When we left office in 2012, Mr. Speaker, the cost of an average house to a Bahamian was $120,000. You want to get a house through the Ministry of Housing, that is what you had to roughly spend. In the middle end, $130,000 was the high end. 5 years later, I looked at the records in the Ministry of Housing, and the average house now costs $150,000 and $160,000. Immediate increase of $25,000 immediately. And I'm told by individuals in the Ministry of Housing that government affordable homes that are sold in Adastra was $160,000. And I said, wow. Wow. So, Mr. Speaker, in keeping with our manifesto and our fervent commitment to the Bahamian people, we are once again delivering for them the thing that Bahamians require most: a place of shelter, a home for them and their families. And we are doing this, Mr. Speaker, with a view, with the understanding, with the commitment that they can afford it and they will get it. This is not going to be talk, Mr. Speaker. Once this bill is passed, you will see hundreds of ordinary Bahamians. In fact, I expect the government is going to have some intense pressure to find public land, to develop these subdivisions so that scores of ordinary Bahamians can get a home. I know, Mr. Speaker, I know that persons in the uniform branches, they're going to be there by the droves because they don't have a lot of spending room. But they could afford to get a house if they could get a government check off, if they could get a guarantee to listen, the customs duty is going to be eliminated. I could afford a contractor. I could negotiate with a contractor. And so, Mr. Speaker, I say to the good people in the uniform branches of the Bahamas, this is what your government is doing for you. We made a fervent commitment to you. We promise you that we will deliver for you. And this is an example of our delivery to you. Mr. Speaker, the Free National Movement has a history of working for the poor. Now, I know that there are one or two persons from the other side who like to craft the PLP as the party of the poor. And I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this because I've had the great opportunity to work in the Camp Road, what I call the Camp Road constituency. And yes, Angliston's father was a champion for the poor. But the PLP simply did not allow him to do what he thought was the right thing for the poor people. And so, when I was teaching in C.I. Gibson, and I spent over 20 years in that space, I had many occasions to sit with this man and to listen to him and to see what his vision was for the persons in the Camp Road area. And he would always leave with the view, with the expression that he wanted not only to eliminate the tears from every eye, but he wanted seriously to see how we could improve the life of poor people. And so today, Angliston should be proud. I don't expect that she will criticize her father's vision. I don't expect that, Angliston.
I can't believe the PLP.
Absolutely. If you look at, if you take an opportunity to look at a paper that he gave to the PLP, where he said, all I want is $2 million. And I could not only gentrify, but I could do wonders in Camp Road. I could remove those outside toilets for $2 million. That's a tough one for Diagla, I might as well tell you. But the things that he did, the vision that he had, was not allowed to flourish in that party. If they had followed his vision, for example, Mr. Speaker, they would have eliminated the shanty towns easily. And that's another thing we did, Mr. Speaker, and I, as an aside, I see people from the opposite side many times talk about dilapidated housing and so on. But during our short term from 2007 to 2012, when I was in office, Mr. Speaker, we eliminated 4 shanty towns. And that may not seem to be much, but when you think about the population in those 4 shanty towns, one had over 800, the next one had 600. You had 200 in Suwash, which is now Fire Trail. You had 150 in Margaret Yard, which is Pride Estates. You had Marquee Yard, Suwash, Government Yard. All of these are subdivisions right along the Fire Trail corridor, where nearly 2,000 persons lived illegally on government property. And what we in the Free National did was we determined that we were going to change that view. We were going to make available to ordinary Bahamians. We were going to take back our government land, and Minister Dion folks is carrying on that charge today. We're going to eliminate shanty towns, and we're going to make those areas available to Bahamians in government-owned subdivisions, because most of the land were owned by the government. And for those private individuals who had land, we mandated that they remove those shanty towns. I could recall, Mr. Speaker, when Marquee Yard was on fire, and some people don't even know where Marquee Yard is no more. It's now called Straw and Sills Estate, a highly structured, developed community where 600 plus illegals were living, where they had illegal electricity, no water. Shantytown on government property. And you look at it today. Look at the individuals who live in Pride Estates or in Dignity West. So, Mr. Speaker, the Free National Movement continues its mandate, continues its trust to ensure that the Bahamian people get the best. And, Mr. Speaker, I now take this opportunity to speak to those young Bahamian professionals, who need a house, need a service lot, need to begin to work and to own something. This is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to come to the government of the Bahamas and get a service lot for $30,000 or less. Mr. Speaker, I live in Garden Hills. Average price of a lot in Garden Hills is $85,000. Average price. If you live in the valley where I live, it may be $70,000. But if you go on the hill, it could range to $180,000. And these professionals in this area, for example, now have an opportunity as first home owners to buy a lot, get customs elimination, and own a home now, Mr. Speaker, that is the cost of a lot.
Wow.
That is what the Free National Movement has done. And when you tie, Mr. Speaker, what we are doing today, when you connect what we're doing today, Mr. Speaker, in land ownership and home ownership to the over-the-hill restoration project to the deliverable unit and public service modernization. This is what the Free National Movement is doing in a big way. This is how we are transforming the Bahamas, and this is only within 1 year. 1 year. We are creating land ownership for under $30,000.
You only got a U.
Over the hill restoration
Huh? Come on, man.
started already. Deliverable unit for Bahamian people. Done. Public service modernization so that the Bahamians could get better service in the public service. Mr. Speaker, you asked.
Tourism through the roof.
Oh,
Flights all over the world.
I've been talking about those things.
man.
I talking about, yes, what the Free National Movement has done in 1 year.
1 year.
So, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend you.
More rooms. We need more rooms.
We are doing what we said we would do, what our commitment was. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I second his bill.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to, and I thank you for your indulgence. Thank you very much, Southern Central Andres. We'll be moving amendments to the bill in the committee stage. I just wanted to inform the Honorable House. It is already being distributed, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide, to promote greater access to affordable homes through the grant of certain exemptions for the building of dwelling homes on service lots within a government-owned subdivision. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak on behalf of the great people of Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros, I stand in this hallowed place to say a few words on this important piece of legislation, Access to Affordable Homes, Bill 2810. Mr. Speaker, the concept of a house as a home should be that of a place of comfort and security, and that has taken root in many areas of the developed world. And we in the developing world, especially as proportions of the populations, have come to own our own homes. And others want to do so also, and have taken note. This view of having a shelter reinforces the idea that many other qualities derive from the place where one lays their hat, more than a roof over one's head, is a critical component to everyday living. Home ownership has become a symbol of family, stability, and wealth. As the largest simple investment for most families, and the driver of demand in enormous sectors of the economy, having had and will continue to play a role in the economies of developing societies such as ours. Mr. Speaker, the practice of most developed economies around the world, inclusive of Canada and other Commonwealth states, will show that housing is almost universally provided through the market on a homeowner-to-homeowner basis, supported by a functional financial system, supplemented where necessary by social housing programs. I know the fact that in Canada, the shortfall in affordable housing in urban centers has and will undoubtedly be dealt with through construction subsidies and rent assistance and favorable mortgage terms for low-income families and other measures to lower the cost burden and create incentives for the creation of low-income housing within the market context. And I would have taken some pains to look at Canada because most of our leading commercial banks
are based out of Canada. Mr. Speaker, it's against the backdrop of understanding the markets and its vulnerabilities and the fiscal inequities, of social dislocation, that it bereft its people of its true sense of worth and ownership in their fair land, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, that the Progressive Liberal Party embarked on a path to empower its people through home ownership. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation was established by an act of Parliament in August 1983, just 10 years after we had become an independent sovereign state. As an approved lender, the corporation was authorized to make government-assured loans under the provision of the Housing Act of 1967. The corporation also could make other private mortgages and loans to individuals who would seek to construct, purchase, or repair, or simply enlarge their home, or persons purchasing vacant lands to construct a dwelling home. Mr. Speaker, under the past administration, the corporation regularly viewed applications that were presented for mortgage loans and also for government-initiated subdivisions in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and the Family of Islands, coupled with a significant number of mortgage requests for private-initiated subdivisions, which were also a part of that process. Mr. Speaker, as one looks at the bill that is at hand today, I take note of page 6. I quote, "This bill seeks to promote greater access to affordable homes through the grant for certain exemptions for the building of dwelling homes or land situated within government-owned subdivision, wherein the subdivision has been provided with all the necessary infrastructure for essential services." Mr. Speaker, every Bahamian would love to own their own home. You've seen the member for Kalani, most recently in a number of town meetings, what we call the heritage communities, or what we call over the hill in the everyday language. But we've not seen nothing profit, or direct, I should say, when it comes to direct housing plan for over the hill. We've seen the white paper. But I suggest to the member for Kalani, I think it's time for him to bring the green paper. Because the people over the hill want real life over the hill, not another paper. They want jobs, access, opportunity, empowerment, and real home ownership. Mr. Speaker, I know of which I speak. It was the policies of the Progressive Liberal Party which, through its policies of constructing homes in what we call now the heritage communities, that my mom, who now resides in McCullough Corner East, Deaconess Lily Mae Forbes, now has a home that we can call our own. Mr. Speaker, I must say, she and countless others are in their homes today due to the Progressive Liberal Party and its policies. I also want to say, at this juncture, a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers of our country, and to my mom, to all the deaconesses of the Church of God Cathedral East Lily in the Valley Corner, and by extension to all the mothers of our country, especially those in Mangrove Key, South, and Central Andros. I would like to, Mr. Speaker, to commend the member Parliament for St. Barnabas, a young man, a lot of energy. Much work has been done with cleaning up and clearing up, moving derelict vehicles and debris from over the hill, household items. I'm simply saying to this administration, instead of having all the talk, you're getting ready to celebrate 1 year tomorrow, go build some homes for people over the hill. There's been much chatter this morning about over the hill, or what we call heritage communities. Ain't no more time for talk, go build some houses over the hill. People ain't want to hear no more talking right now, Mr. Speaker. We want to help, our people want to be empowered in a meaningful way. Mr. Speaker, the people over the hill, once again, don't want no more white paper. They don't want no more green paper. They want real home ownership, especially in the inner city or the heritage communities of this country. Mr. Speaker, I looked through the white paper recently presented by the member for Kalani, and I took a cursory glance at page 15, and I saw there are the Tariff Act exemptions, the Stamp Tax of 2012 exemptions, the exemptions on payment of real property tax, the City of Nassau revitalization regulations of 2008. All of these initiatives, forecasting, and projections mean nothing if it's not fortified by meaningful opportunities to our people in our Commonwealth. It's none other than the member for Kalani, in tabling the Access to Affordable Home Bill 2018, who said that his plan, and I quote, was offering low-cost house to first-time home buyers. That same memo also noted that unfortunately today, the average home may cost anywhere from $180,000 and up. Mr. Speaker, this is a man who espouses the view that he would have come from among us in the heritage community, or what we call over the hill. Well, Mr. Speaker, he acknowledges the high cost of home ownership in this country. So now you're going to offer the opportunity for persons to get a lot, $30,000 to a first-time homeowner. To me, this seems a bit almost insensitive, more for the most part impractical. For the most part, Mr. Speaker, if you were to go to any home owners show or whatever they have around town, Auerbach Homes, the Rogers Brothers, Tennyson Wells, all the different companies and all the new ones who are coming up. Most of the persons who show up to these events are virtually unwed or single mothers. Many of them have 1 or 2 children, sometimes in private schools. They have to fight a challenge with basic utility bills, car payments. And don't let them have elderly parents or a physically challenged or differently abled child. The same mother now, Mr. Speaker, got to find $30,000 or less, as some members have intervened and said, to pay for the lot, try to get this construction done on this government-provided lot that has infrastructure in place. I must also go and look now to the commercial or some lending agency to find money to build a house. So, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is, this is where, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying to you, I am saying the fact of the matter is, this is unsustainable and a very untenable scenario. The fact of the matter is that high professional costs for legal, architectural, surveying costs, for example, construction, and also the fact of the matter is, I would note the fact that in many instances when these same mothers who are building homes in the Bahamas today would have gotten contractors to construct homes, many times you hear them say the money run out. Common scenario. Structures are left incomplete. And sometimes there's change orders that occur on both sides. But the Progressive Liberal Party in this matter was unique and is uniquely different. We stepped in and we became the contractor in the main. We built homes for people and we created, for the most part, a turnkey scenario. We didn't allow you to go through all the headache. The government dealt with the contractor. We make sure that we delivered on our promise. And for the most part, we delivered a finished product to our people in this country. It wouldn't have always been perfect, but that is simply the difference between us and the members on the governing side. Mr. Speaker, any government who really cares about its people would seek to alleviate pain, bloated bureaucracy, and potential financial entrapment for its citizens. The current waiting list was of January 25, 2017. Was just over some 10,000 persons who wanted a government-built home. Just over a year ago, a number of applications by young mothers under the age of 30 with loans, consumer debt, between the figures of $80,000 to $110,000 would have shown up for assistance at the Mortgage Corporation. In many instances, Mr. Speaker, it was connoted as having very little to show for these high level of consumer debt. This was the most prevalent among young law enforcement officers and also members of the armed services. The Mortgage Corporation, under the past administration, Mr. Speaker, sought to bring meaningful relief to the Bahamian people. Therefore, we pursued private partnership to create affordable housing, partnered with housing developers to develop and complete the John Claridge Estates. We also acquired the Foreign Affairs building on East Hill Street and to relocate the main office there, so that for the first time in 35 years, the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation would not have to pay rent since its inception. The acquisition of property and creation of the Queens Park subdivision, which was recently opened by the F&M government and touted as being a part of its housing plan, and also construction had begun under the PLP and it was already left in place when we were voted out of office. There was the completion and further expansion of the Strauns Hill Estates, Fire Trail, and Dignity Garden subdivision. And you heard earlier this morning the member for Garden Hills, my good friend, noting the fact that there are some 300 properties available for persons to purchase in that community. I'm simply saying to him, do the right thing for the Bahamian people. Don't put these persons already challenged to all the stress and the headache. Go build some homes in that area down there where these people can have some real and meaningful relief. Mr. Speaker, we also pursued partnership with private developers to expand the Artistry subdivision. Also, we saw increased private mortgages. Also, there was government-initiated mortgages. Some 201 loans were had, valued at just over $19 million. Private-initiated mortgages also took place in very good numbers. 237 loans in the value of just over some $30 million. These had a total of some 438 loans, valued at just over $49.7 million. Mr. Speaker, one thing that is true, we must educate and protect our people from those who would prey upon them and take advantage of them for financial gain. Mr. Speaker, we must think outside the box and not conform to what we consider the normative dissensus when it comes to home ownership in our fair land. We must ensure that all Bahamians have a fair shot or chance at home ownership. The Family Islands, Mr. Speaker, one of which I'm proud to represent, forms a great opportunity to make home ownership a reality. We want to, in the South Andros community, move beyond the Money Rock subdivision in the Bluff and have, in that great community of South Andros, a sterling example of what a subdivision would look like. And that's why I'm glad that the member, Forker Michael, my lifelong friend, will soon be joining me to visit my hometown community of South Andros, where we can expand on the dream and anticipation of my people in the community of South Andros. He would definitely be, I would definitely be taking you in the next budget cycle, so you have to deliver something for me first. And also for the community of Mangrove Key. It was under the first Christie administration that we had the commencement of the housing subdivision, Mr. Speaker, in the Mangrove Key Little Harbor community. All the infrastructural items were in place, but we had some hiccups with the construction process, light, water, but the design and some other concerns have not completed. Mr. Speaker, so we want to see that development taking place. And I also say that in this process, it's a bit of give and take. So I don't want to build false hope, because some people want all kind of looking on this and that kind of homes, and then they want to have this kind of money. So, you know, you got to be real. There must be a reality check there. So I don't want to build no false hope with our people, Carmichael. So my thing is that if we know we can only go so far, the government would have, I would support the government's initiative to have 1 or 2 or 3, maybe 4 designs that are practical, especially in the family islands, and so that our people can make a good decision, so that we can have some persons, we can lead to some depopulation of the city of Nassau, and also New Providence by extension, and persons could return to our family island communities. I say to the member for Carmichael, I would want him to do this pretty shortly, and I don't want him to wait until I get on that side for it to happen, you know, so I don't want him, you know, so I want him to do that, you know, so I am saying that to the member for Carmichael and Southern Shores. I don't want to start to do that. You know, I would prefer the member for East Grand Bahama to sign the check now and do it early than to wait until I get on that side, Mr. Speaker, when you may be sitting on this side somewhere. God is a good God. You know, then we'll make it happen. And the member for Canada will be sitting right in the middle there where Kalani has that beautiful sign saying Kalani. Mr. Speaker, I must also note the fact that as we are talking about home ownership, my community, I commend the member for Seabreeze for his candor and openness. I'm that kind of fellow. It is. Sorry, member for. Sorry, member for Elizabeth. Sorry.
Elizabeth.
The member for Elizabeth. And I'm one of those fellas. I prefer you to be straight, be a straight shooter. And sometimes when you see when as a senior man, you see the fellas them heckling me this morning. That's when they touch somebody on the nerve. When everybody clapping and everybody quiet, you know what I'm saying? Nothing. When you see you touching somebody, they can make plenty of noise. I've been around a little while. I've seen the best of them in here. Remember the original North Abaco? I've seen them all in here. And so I'm saying, whenever the fellas them start heckling you, and you got this, I understand what you're going through. But all I'm saying to you, by the same token, member for Elizabeth, that the people of my constituency, especially South and Mangrove Key, Brother David Wallace, I know you're watching there in Mangrove Key, and Reverend King and those who remember for Southern Shores met just the other day. They all are waiting for a doctor in our community, and I want to commend the nurses, Penny Brister and Nurse Boleg and Nurse DeVoe and others in Mangrove Key, and South Andros, Nurse Ramming, Nurse Roll and others at the Johnson's Bay Clinic. I want to thank you publicly, because I know it's not easy without a doctor. And we take it for granted sometimes in New Providence, what people in the family islands go through. The reality is, man, look here. You see, because in Miri, them in the bluff, they want to go to the doctor. That's maybe what they call get their blood pressure checked. They got high blood. They want to go to a doctor. They want a doctor to sang them. This down home stuff, man. They want to see a doctor. And that's what drives me daily to stand here for my people. And so the reality is, no matter what, the people of South and Mangrove Key are anticipating having a doctor for those who would have respiratory challenges, hypertension, non-communicable diseases. They need a doctor. Homecomings are coming up in the family islands. Things are happening. Some persons go to the islands driving recklessly. Things happen. But not only then, we want people to know, I want my people to know that I know, and I speak on their behalf when we talk about having a medical doctor in our community. Mr. Speaker, the reality is, I must also note, on the land issue, as the member for Yamacraw would have touched on earlier, I would say shoot a little something across the bow for those in South Andros who may be holding up some progress with the Emerald Palm sale because of some land issue. Please, let's see the bigger picture. Our hometown has been challenged long enough. Let me talk directly to you. Look in my face. We've been challenged long enough. If we are people who want to invest in our community, we must find a way to move forward. The people of South Andros have hurt long enough. So I'm saying to those who have their little interests and enclaves and what have you, we got to find a way to trash things out, but we must move on because it's time for us now to put South Andros before personal interests. We Through having these developments, we can create a shift in population to the family islands, where acres of land that have laid fallow over the years can see some development. Home ownership, especially in the urban centers, what we call the heritage communities, could create job creations, construction-related jobs. Basic upgrading will keep our young men in Odell Corner, Taylor Street, Ross Corner, where Frankie Wilson now, Sir Franklin Wilson and others grew up, Tooth Shop Corner busy, attract employers and employees due to new businesses, and also a skilled labor force, and also create higher levels of literacy and tolerance in these communities, Mount Moriah, where you would be able to sleep a little better at night instead of your phone ringing 70 times at night. Increase consumer spending in a meaningful way. And I would want to see the everyday Bahamian over the hill being empowered through these new opportunities. No problem with our Chinese investors now who join us in our community, But I want to see, once again, the everyday Bahamians who look like me and the member for Cat Island look like us, who are investing and building over the hill once again. I ain't got enough word about that today. Borrowing power, increase in construction in small and medium-sized businesses would definitely lead to the further development of small brick-and-mortar enclaves in the Overhill community. I am concerned daily, Mr. Speaker, as you drive down East Street. My mom house is right on the McCullough corner. She's right there now watching me before she go to prayer meeting right now. Mom, I love you. Mother's Day coming. And you go right now by the Candy Kitchen. I'm a down home boy. You go over the hill right now. You go by the Candy Kitchen right now, and I'm glad the press is watching this. You go there. When you get by the Candy Kitchen, by Mortimer's Candy Kitchen, half of the road break off on East Street, man. It's a shame. On both sides, it's embarrassing to see it. This is East Hill Street. No. Mr. Speaker, I made this point. I am saying to you, the member for Kalani always talk about him being a man up the hill, over the hill. Very valued member to the Shell Saxon Superstars. You know how I feel about them. So the reality is, I would want us to look at East Street. My church is on East Street. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, talking about the everyday person, the reality is when you talk about caring for people and talking about homes, this is the second or third person who's brought it to my attention. The member for Mount Moriah maybe would have left at the wrong time. I wanted to bring this point up, along with the member for Carmichael. Let's drive by the prison. Many people maybe have no family members in the Majesty, now the Correctional Center. Look at that portion of the park they recently acquired, or maybe the car they're paying for still, or the opposite, the prison would be called the Correctional. You see how that thing, how the road drops off down the side here? I saw women, two ladies the other morning, having to push their cars over that. I'm saying, for our people, man, the reality is, people have family members in the Correctional Institute. They got to go and see them. And there's how persons who could hardly get their cars back up on the main road when you were to be driving and traversing in the front of the Correctional Institute, the prison we call it. It's hard. And if people have said it to me, I thought it's no more than fair, Mr. Speaker, for me to bring it to the attention of this Honorable House. Sometimes the little things that makes the difference. Governing Southern Shores, you learn, is continuous. Governing is continuous. Mr. Speaker, we'll see, should these developments over the hill, rental units and apartments will be improved and be more attractive to the younger generation. It gives our citizens a sense of pride. Our heritage communities would once again be inhabited by us. Not only by those who seek to join us, be inhabited by us. So let's turn our Brazilian-type favelas into opportunities for our people through empowerment zones, through real empowerment zones of home ownership in the inner city or the heritage communities. Mr. Speaker, although I am tasked to some degree to support this piece of legislation, I note the fact that it offers an opportunity for our people to have some level of empowerment. And I hope that this government in his wisdom, would also look once again at his white paper when it comes to bring the green paper with real opportunity for the inner city communities. Would include the construction in a very direct way of small homes, not only home repair, small homes construction in the inner city community, and give power to the people. It is against this backdrop, Mr. Speaker, as a responsible member of a Majesty's Loyal Opposition, headed by my great leader, the member for Cat Island, Round Queens, and Salvador, that I must support any effort that will put a shelter over our people's head. Affordable land and home ownership can translate into a brand new day for our people as we seek to build, empower, forward together. Mr. Speaker, let's build a brand new day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and much obliged.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It really is a privilege and a pleasure to rise to address this honorable House, having been sent here by the wonderful people of Elizabeth. I would be remiss if I did not look towards the upcoming weekend. I am a fellow who has benefited from the nurture, the advice, the love, and the care of powerful women. All of my aunts, my sisters, my mother, my grandparents have contributed mightily to the development of this great country. And so to them, and to all of the women in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas who carry an extra load, they carry a little bit more of the burden than perhaps they should. But most especially to the mothers of Elizabeth, I wish you happy Mother's Day. Mr. Speaker, this morning we're here to debate the Access to Affordable Homes Bill 2018. And I cannot help but reminisce to a day when a bill like this would probably have arisen from the side opposite. You see, Her Majesty's loyal opposition once were really progressive. Once they were really liberal. But you know, and to my good friend from South and Central Andros, you know, you're saying personal. Mr. Speaker, no less a man than President Franklin Roosevelt would have said that in politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can bet it was planned that way. And so, when we talk about housing in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, it's important that we know a little bit about how we got here. We need to go back to the Housing Act, 1967. We need to come through the Immovable Properties Act, 1981. That was a disaster. And it was a disaster was not remedied until the International Persons Landholding Act, which some people have some issues with, but it made a lot of Bahamian landholders very wealthy. Mr. Speaker, people ask, what is the Bahamian dream? I would need to go to a sage who would have been in the Progressive Liberal Party at one time. I speak of no one other than Orinthia Komalafi, who in a series of essays spoke about the Bahamian dream. And I would paraphrase a little bit. Bahamians, when they think about what they want in this country, they want self-governance. The Bahamian dream envisions access to education for all. It envisions safety, access to good health care. It envisions a closure of the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And it also envisions owning a part of this rock that we call the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. But to reward those bright ideas, Orinthia Komalafi was pushed out of the Progressive Liberal Party, and she now resides in another party, the Democratic National Alliance. Some very unfortunate words were spoken about her spouse by the side opposite, and I believe that contributed to this progressive mind leaving that organization. In 1982, the Progressive Liberal Party won re-election, and they appointed a certain person from North Abaco as Minister of Housing. And he would have been, mind you give it my speech, and he would have been appointed as Minister of Housing and ushered in the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. One of the first housing subdivisions of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation is near and dear to my heart and to the heart of the member for Yamacraw, and that is Elizabeth Estates. Elizabeth Estates saw an opportunity for average Bahamians to move into an area where previously there was no possible chance for them to own a part of New Providence. Now, what's interesting is that subsequent to the good work done in the creation of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, etc., the then Minister of Housing was rewarded by being fired by the leadership, or the leader, the Prime Minister at the time, Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinland. And what we have seen subsequently in housing has been an ebb and flow. So those that aspire and claim to be progressive and wanting to encourage the Bahamian dream have demonstrated policies and procedures and approaches that has resulted in the destruction of the viability of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. So much so, Mr. Speaker, that when I was chairman of the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation,
Let's listen to this.
I encountered a corporation that had a 40% delinquency rate. 40% delinquency rate. At the time, the portfolio had about 3,000 mortgages on the books, 1,000 of which were underwater. The majority of the mortgages which were underwater were issued during a PLP administration. Many of the mortgages that were issued when we attempted to collect on mortgages that were in arrears, we were told, my MP give me this house, I ain't got to pay no mortgage. Mr. Speaker, when we moved to 2012 to 2017, the Minister of Housing, the Honorable Kenred Dorset, would have promised the Bahamian people in a speech that the Progressive Liberal Party between 2012 and 2017 was going to build no less than 1,300 homes. If we require verification, you can refer to an article written on March 7, 2013 by Sieska Adderley. The Ministry of Housing would have drawn down on a loan from the National Insurance Board $10 million. it was anticipated that that would contribute to this aggressive housing campaign. Mr. Speaker, what we find is that no more than 55 homes were constructed. And if you do the arithmetic,
Out of 1,500.
$10 million divided by 55 is $181,000 per home. Mr. Speaker, the IDB, in a report published in 2016 under that administration, reported that 21% of the Bahamian households could not afford a home if it costs more than $20,000. I'll say that again. The IDB reported in 2016 that 21% of Bahamian households were so strapped, so poor, that they could not afford what was called affordable housing, and that the most they could afford was $18,000 for a home. At that time, the houses being built were between $150,000 and $160,000. Now I ask the question, Mr. Speaker, if you propose, if you hold yourself out to have the interest of the poor man, then why would you make houses unaffordable for those most in need? Mr. Speaker, the problem, I believe, is that this was never about actually helping people to get homes. This was about optics, and this was about having people believe that they were on those people's run. And so, Mr. Speaker, we move now to 2017. The member of Kalani, his cabinet, and his parliamentary colleagues made a commitment to the people. And we have said that it is indeed the people's time. It required a consideration of progressive, liberal approaches. And so I want to propose today, Mr. Speaker, that the opposition formally put in a request to be renamed. Because, as I've said, they are neither progressive nor liberal. The idea of the transformation of Bahamians and their lot in life requires an understanding and an acceptance that Bahamians are entitled to live the Bahamian dream, and that government ought to be in the business of making self-governance a reality, that government ought to be in the business of ensuring that all of our children have access to a quality education, that all of our people are safe, and that we are paying attention to crime, that we're paying attention to murder, that we're paying attention to corruption. We have to radically change our healthcare system. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, we've got to close the gap between those that have and those that have not. That, Mr. Speaker, is what this bill is all about. Now, the Minister of Finance, the member for East Grand Bahama, I am certain will point out the reality of life in the Bahamas. As of March 2018, Mr. Speaker, the Central Bank of the Bahamas, in its quarterly report, will show that there are $863 million worth of loans in arrears in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. $863 million. $566 million worth of mortgages that are non-performing. Despite that dismal reality, Mr. Speaker, over the last year, since the people's government has been in place, we have seen a reduction year over year $121 million of loans in arrears, a 4% reduction in mortgages in arrears. You don't have to believe me, Mr. Speaker. You can click on to the Central Bank of the Bahamas website, go up to the top left-hand corner, click on report from March of 2018. The numbers are all there for Bahamians to see. And this is without promising a mortgage relief plan that was nothing more than a sham. Mr. Speaker, so here we are today now, creating a realistic approach to home ownership. We realize that many people want to do these things piece by piece by piece. And so when we talk about making land available to Bahamians, we believe that the government should be in the business of providing service lots that can be provided affordably to young Bahamians and maybe some not so young. The people that we want to target with this, Mr. Speaker, are those people who provide yeoman service to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I'm speaking about people like nurses. I'm speaking about people like policemen. I'm speaking about people like teachers, all of whom create or contribute mightily to the development of this country, but who have been unable to afford to live the Bahamian dream. Mr. Speaker, let's go back to Elizabeth Estates and look at what has happened over the last 40 years. It used to be that a young person, no matter how much they were making, could afford to buy their home. But if you go into some of these communities now, you find that the grandparent owns the home. And that the children and their children are living in the home with the grandparents. Yes. Mr. Speaker, that's not right in the Bahamas of 2018. But this FNM government, the people's government, we can fix that, Mr. Speaker. Let the facts speak for themselves. And so when we talk about affordable homes, they have to be truly affordable. There is no point saying to somebody that we're going to provide you with a $180,000 home when all you can afford is $100,000. Because you are setting that person up to fail. And even if they can afford to pay the mortgage, are they going to be able to maintain the home? Are they going to be able to afford a new car? Are they going to be able to afford insurance, and so on? As I get ready to close, Mr. Speaker, we need to be in the business of ensuring that our housing programs are intended to provide sturdy, safe, well-constructed homes for Bahamians. While we understand there's a secondary goal of providing jobs for contractors, those contractors have to build sturdy, safe, well-constructed homes. We need to understand that the money spent by the government of the Bahamas on the initial outlay should be well spent. Not that we should have to come back 5 years later, 10 years later, to repair the foundations that were improperly built. We need to understand that we should never be putting our people in a position where they will drown financially. We should also be using housing and other types of tax concessions as a means of rewarding and showing appreciation to those who are building this country. And I say again, to our nurses, to our teachers, to our armed service professionals. Mr. Speaker, we've come a long way in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Some of the heavy lifting was done by the side opposite. But despite their early start, they lost their way. And so now the Free National Movement, led by the member for Kalani and his entire group of parliamentarians, we understand that affordable housing is an integral part of being able to live the Bahamian dream. And Mr. Speaker, we believe that our people, especially our children, need to dream. We're going to make it happen, Mr. Speaker. Elizabeth supports this bill. Thank you very much.
As many? Just a
We got a
moment,
couple
please.
of, I'm going to go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, I know I want to, can I speak now? I'd like to speak now. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the
We have a
honourable
couple more
member
speakers too.
for Angleton.
And you might have one or two on your side also.
You know, if we come up with like
Uh-oh. Ooh, that's a revelation. Ooh. Speaker, I rise on behalf.
Honourable members, the member for Angleton has the floor.
Speaker, I rise on behalf of people of Angleton to contribute to this bill. I wanted to, I really could have deferred, but I wanted to speak in the aftermath of the member for Elizabeth. And Speaker, you know, what is amazing is hearing the self-conviction that we see in this House of how members of the government have so convinced themselves that they're doing such a great job and that the Bahamian people love them so much. And much self-praise we see carrying on in this House. But I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I want to begin by doing two things. First, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak about this is Maritime Week, and the minister is here, and I want to thank him because he invited me to church service. And it was 7:30 in the morning. I believe that was his way of saying don't come. But we go to the same church because he knows I go to the later service. But he has a week of wonderful activities, and I want to commend him for the work that he's doing there. And the week is named in honor of the deputy chairman, Mr. Peter John Galandras, and I just wanted to pay tribute to him and to also say to the government that I think it was a very sound step to make to name it in his honor, because he has been an incredible influence on the maritime sector in this country. He's been actively involved in national affairs in this area, and not just in the maritime, but generally, but more particularly in the maritime sector. And he served for many years in successive administrations, both sides of the political spectrum, as deputy chairman. He has been a staple and a constant of the Maritime Authority, and it says much about who he is and what he has done. And I served as minister for 2 terms with responsibility for relations with the BMA, which is 10 years, as we know, in full. And I found Mr. Galandras to be an outstanding patriarch who has given much of himself and his resources in the growth and development of the maritime sector. And this included first-time scholarships for maritime students in the Bahamas who have gone to universities all over the world and who are now on ships all over the world. He also was part of that effort that began when I first served, the formation of the Bahamas Maritime Cadet Corps, which began as a small group in their first graduation exercise of the Defense Force, just a handful, and I was privileged to be there, and today comprises hundreds of young people nationwide, all of whom go to school in Canada, or New York, SUNY Institute, in the UK, in California, all over, and they're on ships all over the world, in the Black Sea, everywhere. Bahamians are on ships, and he's also at each election at the IMO, on the ground. He's well known, and he's there campaigning on behalf of our country, and has been very influential in our repeated re-election to the Bahamas Council. He's been passionate about creating new markets and new niches for the flag, and most recently, along with the then chairman, Anthony Kiki-Varakis, they hit unprecedented heights for the BMA and made record achievements. And so I just want to just give him the highest praise, and I hope the week goes well. I only got invited to the church service, but as they say, everything cool. Well, don't worry about that. But it seems like a wonderful week, and I think it's an excellent initiative that's happening. And I also wanted to commend. I know tomorrow is an important anniversary, and I just wanted to throw my 5 cents in it, because I am one of those Bahamians who have the highest regard and respect for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And tomorrow, yes, when we got a member here, and you can tell the way he speaks, you know, he's from that's one of our fine institutions. That's the member for North Abaco. But we're on the eve of the anniversary of the famous HMBS Flamingo incident, if you can call it that. And I went online, I was reading just a brief summary. We're all aware of the facts, but the summary was just so compelling about what happened, and only a few weeks after just the formation of the Defense Force. And I found something on the Defense Force website talking about it, and they speak about how this vessel on the 10th of May 1980 encountered this incident. The HMBS Flamingo was a 103-foot patrol vessel, and it was on a routine 10-day patrol of Bahamian waters. So they were on the waters for what should have been 10 days in a new institution, the newly formed. There were 18 crew members, and they were protecting waters. When the incident happened, they were protecting waters from Cuban poachers. And they apprehended 2 vessels. And the Defense Force officers boarded the craft, arrested the persons on board, confiscated the fish, and then towed the vessel. They were heading to Key Santo Domingo. Shortly thereafter, 2 Cuban military MiG fighter jets buzzed the Flamingo jet with our Bahamian Marine officers, the vessel. And the article says they let go several volleys of machine gun fire parallel to its starboard side and directly in front of the ship's bow. And then the captain or the commander hoisted the flag to make it clear this was the marine arm of a sovereign state, and that we were in Bahamian waters. However, 45 minutes later, the jets returned. And then they had a second assault with rockets and machine gun fire. On this occasion, the Flamingo was hit and took on water. Communications equipment went down. The bridge burst in flames. The crew had to abandon ship, and they were in the water. And the jets returned, strafing them in the water with machine gun fire and destroying their lifeboats. Eventually, they were rescued from the water, but this is something I really did not know, and I found out when we did the stamp commemoration when Amos Rowell spoke, because eventually they were rescued, and well, some died, but the survivors were rescued and went to Ragged Island. But even on Ragged Island, the Cuban jet fighters returned to Ragged Island, not on the sea, returned to Ragged Island, and on 9:30 Sunday morning, they simulated rocket attacks over the island of Ragged Island. And there was a military helicopter by the Cubans which actually landed in Ragged Island. And it was ultimately a U.S. scramble jet came, and it caused for the withdrawal. It was described as a 3-hour ordeal. And the article says that for days, the officers were taking melted steel from their skin and hair as a result of being in the water and the heat from the fire. When we did the stamp commemoration, I wanted to do something that was very different, and I want to do it just for this house, because the officers that died, and these are the ones who appear with the stamp commemoration shows their face, their images, was Fenric Sturrup, David Tucker, Edward Williams, and Austin Smith. But when I was doing the stamp commemoration when I was Minister of Transport, I found out that there were some survivors. And I also found out that they had great difficulty after this event for a number of reasons. I mean, psychological, and it was just and still for some, it has been a very difficult period. And so what I did on that occasion, I wanted to name all of the officers, to put in perspective the ones that paid the ultimate price, who lost their lives, those 4 men, but also those who survived. And I just want to call their names in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker. The commander was Lieutenant Commander Amos Roll, now retired. Senior Lieutenant, the officers were Senior Lieutenant Anthony Allens, also retired. Senior Lieutenant Wilfred Sands, now deceased. And the crew members, Petty Officer Peterson James, retired. What's LM? Leading Mechanic Denzel Clark, retired. Leading Mechanic Gregory Curry, retired. Leading Mechanic Oscar Miller, deceased. LSs. Leading Seaman Willard Saunders, AB. Able Seaman Trevor Sands. I'm going to avoid the, I don't know I got this from the Defense Force. I'll just call their names. Whitfield Neely, who I believe is still in active duty. Anthony Russell, Lieutenant Commander now. Anthony Russell, Leo Kirby, who recently died, John Wallace, Cladwell Farrington, Eugene Thompson, and then, of course, those who died in the line of duty, Fenric Sturrett, David Tucker, Austin Smith, and Edward Williams. And I just want to just use the first few moments of my presentation or my contribution to pay tribute to these fine sons of our soil and to say that we must always uphold the Defense Force in this country. Always. And so, Mr. Speaker, and I want to express my gratitude, love, and respect for these men and for the sacrifice that they paid in defense of this country, and that those who continue to do so, who are at sea as we speak, confronting dangerous circumstances. And, sorry? I'm told their names on the cenotaph. Oh, right here, right here. You mean the 4 men or the entire 4 men? The 4 men on the cenotaph. So I just want to do that, Mr. Speaker, and to uphold in high. And it tells you the legacy of the Bahamian people. Yes, may their souls rest in peace, and may those who are alive find peace, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, this is, it tells you what a great country we have. And, you know, that's why sometimes when you come in here, it's difficult because the political diatribe is just so over the top. And we heard some of it this morning. No, I'm not. But I heard all the talk about how we do this and how we waste all this money. So I asked someone who from the former administration to remind me. I said, come on now, seems like we're getting down to this sort of petty dialogue. Tell me something about their housing program. And then they said, well, they told me, and I only get them to respond, so that and I want to move beyond this because I don't think this is where the level we should get to, because trust me when I tell you, the Bahamian people ain't interested. They don't care what the PLP did 15 years ago or 10 years ago. What they're interested in now, because they elected you, is what is it that you are going to deliver to advance the cause of the Bahamian people. But seeing that you all still believe that it's all about setting up a contrast, compare and contrast, all I said is, as they say, carry on smartly. Speaker? Speaker, I was told that in the housing development, the prior administration, they had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars correcting defective work in the Chippenham Housing Division. I didn't get the specifics. I could get it. And it'll probably be a horror story over and over and over and over. So we don't want to go there. The other thing I want to say is that for the member for Elizabeth, the mortgage, I know, we have to be honest with the Bahamian people. The statistics that you speak of relate nothing to do with anything that has been done by this administration. It's to do with certain measures that were taken prior to this administration. And in fact, when the Minister of Finance gave his budget communication, when you were in office 3 weeks or whatever it was, he was able to show in that, demonstrate that the number of non-performing mortgages had significantly diminished. And it has nothing to do with anything. I mean, I know you all look in the mirror and think you are great and wonderful and fantastic, and just because you're here, everything's just so wonderful, but there's a real world, and sometimes it takes hard work, it has to make hard decisions, and I know the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador will be contributing to this, and he will speak a little bit, I guess, about the measures taken, but it has much to do about the initiatives taken by the prior administration to deal with defaulting mortgages and a mortgage relief approach. And so that is, so therefore you will know. listen, you don't want to go, let me get to the budget. We can talk about the budget. We can talk about all of the mix-up stories that have been presented to Bahamian people. Yes, it's this. No, it ain't that. We can get there. We ain't there right now. But I'm saying do not mislead the Bahamian people. The statistic he speaks of, it was something that this Minister of Finance was able to speak to when he was in office, when milk was still dripping from around his mouth. He was in office a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks. Did nothing. And so let's be honest. No, I know, sorry. It's not disrespectful. It's to say that you were new, green, new. You were new. It's a Bahamian expression for those who don't know. You can't be Indian, you don't even know your Bahamian expressions. You were new. Okay, Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of a... Sorry? No. Oh, we're there now? Okay, all right. I can't throw another blow or two, nothing like that. I'll sit down. I'll stop. I'll come back. No, I'm responding.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House suspends until 3 p.m. I second that.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House do suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
3.
As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. Business of the House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.